Speaking of board and trains, there's one off camera. He's acting a damn fool over there. Being a goof. Hi guys, welcome back.
Welcome.
Call me mid-yawn.
So today we're going to talk about more of the kind of differences and somewhat similarities of the board and trains and the one-on-ones between me and Michelle. And starting kind of with the first day intake, or for me intake, for you, I guess, meeting everyone. I guess why I wanted to talk about this kind of topic and see where it goes is that first day for me on that intake, we do have a questionnaire that the owners fill out and kind of write what their major issues are, their major goals, stuff like that. And so that I have somewhat of an idea going into what this dog needs help with and stuff. But what I do find a lot of the time is that on intake, when I finally meet the owners and the dog especially, sometimes I feel like things can be a little skewed from the owner's perspective to what I kind of switch my routine to make sure that those goals are met.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the biggest ones being the thought of aggression, but then in reality of just fear and reactivity of that fear. But I don't know, I thought it would just be interesting to kind of talk about that, how we can kind of see certain things just by meeting a dog or just by maybe that first lesson of interacting with a dog, and how you might kind of change your routine of things based on kind of what you see from a dog, you know?
Yeah.
But so for example, you know, if a dog does come in and on the questionnaire, you know, has nipped a couple people, blah, 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 has this aggression on walks, whatever. And then I meet the dog and it's like tails between its legs, hiding behind the owner, you know, like completely backed up. To me, that first right away is that dog's not necessarily aggressive. It's just scared shitless and, you know, wants nothing to do with anyone or anything. So I immediately kind of go from, okay, this dog's aggressive, you know, need to kind of tiptoe, maybe let it get comfortable, and then we can kind of start working through things, to the anxiety of, well, let me kind of like get it more comfortable, but in a way of being there, like I always take the dog up into the room, into the training room, and just kind of let it do its thing and just kind of desensitize it to me without actually having to interact. Yeah. Because obviously that's what can trigger dogs. But, and then to the point of like aggressive dogs, you know, it's something where it's like, okay, maybe just let them chill and like desensitize to the environment first. Yeah. And then come into it, you know. But obviously I have a little bit more flexibility with that than you do in terms of first lessons and stuff. Yeah. So is there anything in your line, in your one-on-ones, that you kind of approach different dogs differently? Yeah. I guess.
But it is, I mean, the topic of like the term aggressive too is always fascinating. Yes. Like it's used in so many different ways. And I think that it gets thrown around a lot. It takes a lot for me to actually label a dog like aggressive.
Same.
Like a lot. And usually to me, like to say like your dog is aggressive or you have an aggressive dog, it's usually like the dog displays aggressive behaviors truly because that is like its desire. Usually people throw that word around and it's like, well, the aggression you're seeing is more a symptom of the problem. Right. It's not the problem.
A reaction to the issue.
Yeah, it's like the dog is scared, so it's biting. Or the dog is over aroused, so it's biting,
Mm-hmm.
or the dog is resource guarding, so it's biting,
Yep.
or so it's like there's an underlying issue, and then it's manifesting into aggression. But so to me, that's not really an aggressive dog.
Right.
An aggressive dog is a dog that is going to show aggression because that is like the whole purpose of it.
His
they're
goal
not
or
they're
whatever.
not using aggression to get as a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
The aggression is the end.
Mm-hmm.
that's the end
That
goal
is, they,
for them.
they came at it in that goal of, yes, aggression, right?
Yes. So I usually find that most owners are very happy. I have that discussion with them, and I think most owners are like very happy to hear that like you don't have an aggressive dog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, your dog maybe has bit other dogs, bit people, whatever, but like if your dog is truly an aggressive dog, that is something that is very difficult to fix.
Right.
Like, you're not gonna fix it.
Yes.
The dog has the aggressive behaviors, and like they will be that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a dog who is, and I would say most of the time those dogs are very dominant dogs.
Yes.
And that's a whole nother aspect. And I've met a couple of them, and that's a whole nother nuanced conversation as far as like with those types of dogs. But most dogs showing aggressive behaviors are just scared. So it's like you have a scared dog that either you're not advocating for and they're in positions that they shouldn't be in and they're biting, or whatever the situation is. So most of the time you can have those conversations with people, because I think that, like you said, we have the questionnaire. I like the questionnaires a lot because, one, it obviously gives us information about the dog that we need to know that are like very black and white state. Like some of the questions are subjective, and some of them are very black and white.
Mm-hmm.
So like the information that's very black and white, I like because it can't be misinterpreted. It's like, did your dog bite somebody?
Right.
Yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they can list out the situation or whatever. But then there's also subjective things like, is your dog, like, have you socialized your dog? Like, what type of, like, what are your
interact with
issues?
children,
What are your
stuff like
main
that.
goals? Like, all that kind of stuff. And I like that information because it also gives me an insight into, like, the mindset of the owner.
The owner, yeah.
Like, how they write things and how they give you the information is very important and indicative of where their head is at. Because you get some people that they write down the information and you can tell they're like, I think I have the worst dog in the world.
Yeah.
Like, my dog is like, I don't have them around other dogs because I don't know what they would do. Or
the more detail,
yes.
I find, yeah.
Yeah, and like the more, and just their tone behind it, So, going into that lesson, like, okay, this person, I want to, once I meet the dog, and maybe their dog is as bad as they say. You know what I mean? Like, okay, and then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Most of the time it's not those people. So it's usually like, I like being able to see the dog, feel it out a little bit, and then be able to talk to them about like, okay, so let's give you a true picture on the kind of dog you actually have. And it's not as bad as you think it is, type of thing. But then I also have those owners where like, there's like a laundry list of bites, and then maybe their goal is like, oh, you can tell maybe they're not taking it as seriously as they should, And so then, okay, with this client, I need to be a little bit more pointed in our discussions because they need to know the gravity of this.
Right.
Like, you have a liability.
Yeah.
And you've allowed it to, put people and other dogs in very compromising situations, and it's your job.
As well as the dog itself,
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need to take responsibility of this and start taking it seriously because clearly you're not, type of thing. So I think that I like our questionnaires for that reason because, yes, it gives us information, but I more so use it to gauge the human more than the dog. So there's a little insight into that. When you fill out the paperwork, I care less about what it says about your dog and more about what it's saying about you as the owner.
We analyze.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I mean, when people come in, like, most good dog trainers, like, you can read dogs, but you can read people very well. Like, very, very well. Because you have to be able to read a person's personality type, be able to kind of figure out like, how can I communicate with this person that it's going to be the most effective and get through to them, you know? So it's not that I'm like, and when you start talking about like how to build relationships and rapport with clients and stuff, it can start to sound like I'm inauthentic because maybe I'll change how I am, like depending on who I'm interacting with. But it's not that I'm being inauthentic. It's that, I mean, naturally as humans, like we connect with certain people in different ways.
Right.
And so, yeah, I may behave a little bit differently with one client or the other, but it's more so just because like I want them to feel as comfortable as possible.
It's that way of communication.
Yeah, and I'm not changing me. You're not getting a different version of me depending on who you are, but I am probably tapping into different aspects of my personality, maybe more for this person or that person, just to find
definitely do that.
Common ground, you know, because there's some clients that need a more like compassionately led, you know, session where you're taking more time to like talk about the real in-depth reasons of why we're doing and why it's important, and you're leading in a more emotional way because that's just what they need. And then there's some clients that don't care about that, and they'd rather like make the jokes and like, you know what I mean, like, so it's different depending on who you're working with.
Absolutely.
And I think a good dog trainer can kind of not only see a dog and be like, okay, this is the type of dog I have, here's the plan, the trajectory of what we're going to do, and then also be like, okay, and here's the type of human I have and what their personality is like and how I need to adjust and maybe tweak things here and there so that it goes smoothly with them too. You know, because if you have a really hard dog, and hard is in like tough, like they're very strong, they're firm, they're not sensitive, you have to be very like structured and on top of things with them, but then you have a really soft owner. That's a hard balance.
Yes.
Because you have to figure out how to still accomplish what you need to accomplish with the dog and maybe have some of those hard moments, but you also need to develop the owner in a way that they can do that, you know? Because,
and keep it consistent.
Exactly. Because, I mean, inevitably, you just have those matchups where I've gotten lucky, and some of the hard dogs I've gotten have hard owners, and it works really well because the owner is like, I want to fix this. I'm ready to do what I need to fix this. I just don't have the information to know what to do. And
that kind of comes back to what you were saying with like reading the questionnaire.
Yes.
Like, you know, those people that are like, all right, my dog's being a jerk. This needs to change. And then other people that are a little bit more, maybe not oblivious, but, you know, like a little bit more kind of lax with it. And they're just like, well, you know.
Like, my dog has bit 5 people, but I rescued them and I think they were abused and stuff like that. Which, like, again, like, this is all good information.
Right.
You know, I want to know all of those things. But then also figuring out how to communicate to that client, like, I get it. You know, you think the dog is coming from this place of trauma and all this kind of stuff, but in reality, we don't know that for sure. So we can't behave in a way that's concrete evidence.
And it's not their life now.
Yeah. Right, and it's funny because I was talking to a client actually the other day because she said kind of a similar thing. She's like, she asked, you know, have you worked with like some really extreme dogs and stuff like that? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, it's probably hard because a lot of those dogs probably come from like really terrible situations. And I was like, you know, honestly, looking at it and thinking of all the dogs that I've worked with over my career that were either the most aggressive or intense, 0 of them came from a bad background.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with that. Truly, like most of the dogs I can think of, a couple of them were adopted, but they were adopted when they were like 10 weeks old. You know what I mean? So it's like, there was no, I mean, how much can you abuse a dog up to 10 weeks old that at 3 years old, you know, they're displaying all these extreme aggressive behaviors and all, like, at that point, even if they were abused for 10 weeks, when you get the dog between 10 weeks and 3 years,
right,
you've been the majority of the influence.
Well, and again, I think a lot of it has the anxiety. Like I think dogs can acquire that anxiety or that separation anxiety being like in a shelter or something like that, and then getting rescued. But I feel like there are situations though that it's overlooked, and it's something where the anxiety has that reaction of the aggression, and then that's what people use as like, oh well, they were in the shelter for so long, so that's why they're aggressive.
Yeah,
it's again, like we were saying, it's the reaction to the anxiety that forces them to be that, that aggressiveness. But that sort of thing, to a degree, again, like you were saying, like truly aggressive dogs are always going to have that aggression, as well as like, some really anxious dogs are always going to have that anxiety.
Yes.
But it's something that it can be helped, I believe, to, even whether it's the aggression or really severe anxiety, it can be helped to a point of at least management, for most dogs.
No, I agree. Because every dog like has, I would say, certain limitations, maybe, of things like when you get into like really severe cases and stuff. But like, because when I say a truly aggressive dog, I still want to differentiate between like an unstable, like neurologically messed up dog. There's still a difference there.
Yes,
like
there absolutely
a truly aggressive dog who is like dominant and uses aggressions to like achieve the end of like, I just want to dominate and be in charge. That, or even like like you get a dog who is like truly dog aggressive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those exist.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna change that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So there's certain things where it's like, but it's not a neurologically unstable dog in that it's unpredictable. Their aggression is still very predictable. You know what I mean? You know when it's gonna happen. It's just that it's not happening because of another cause.
Right.
The cause is that I want to be aggressive, so I'm going to be aggressive type of thing. And so you can still work through that stuff and get to a good place with it. You just have to, those dogs require just a very high skill level. Yeah. As an owner or a handler.
Like hanky boy.
Yeah.
Kinda
yeah,
like
absolutely. You have to have a very high skill level as a handler, and you have to have great management.
Yeah.
and
that is what it is, and that's kind of coming back like those are those things though, that like when I meet that dog for the first time, those are like
right away.
Yeah. So I guess also going to it, or on the topic, is there, I mean, I know you were saying like you talked to the owner about kind of like, this is the dog that you actually have.
Yeah.
Is there ever anything that you like tell owners, or maybe think about telling owners, that would help to kind of like, I don't know how to say it, but in that same sense of like trying to have the owners understand their dog better? Are there other ways that you can think of that would help owners realize those things, of the point of, okay, my dog's not aggressive, but it's really anxious? I don't know. I just think that like sometimes when I meet these owners and the dogs, there are certain things where I don't know how I can see it better. I mean, just from working with the dogs, but that it's like,
it's more experience. You've seen over a chunk of time, like you just have a larger sample size. So like you see dogs that display, like at this point, like I rarely ever am confronted with a dog where I'm like, I've never seen this before.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like most of the time, like they display the same behaviors, and through working with multiple dogs like that, you eventually find that it all comes from the same source. So you're like, oh, okay, so most of the time if a dog is doing this, it's because of this.
Right.
So then you can whereas owners, like, they've never seen it before, you know, so they don't have all
because they've had German Shepherds the whole life, and then they finally get this one German Shepherd something's different, right?
And I think, I don't know, I mean, most of the time when I'm talking to clients, because I think this is maybe a difference from the one-on-ones versus the board and trains, is that when you, like, yeah, you have your initial, like, conversation with the owner and the intake and stuff like that, but then, like, they leave and you get to just truly see the dog in, like, a raw state, really. I mean, you could argue that, like, being in an entirely new environment around all of these new people and yada, 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 is making the dog behave different. But I would actually argue that you're probably seeing it in a more authentic state than if you had the owners around and you were in their house and you were in all these comfortable places, because those factors add... kind of like embolden the dogs a lot of times. So like when the owners are around and when they're in their homes, they behave drastically different than in most other environments.
Yeah.
So I feel like the way a dog behaves, their behavior that's consistent in the most situations is who the dog actually is, rather than like that one place where they behave weirdly different. I don't know if what I'm saying is coming across or if it's confusing, but it's like if your dog,
it makes sense to me.
If your dog behaves like a certain way at the vet and at the park and out in public and at these stores and in all these other places, their behavior is all the same, but at home it's different.
Yeah.
Then who your dog is in those places is actually who your dog probably is.
Yeah.
So it's like when the dog comes to the facility and it's hiding in the corner and it's terrified, but at home it would be charging the door and biting people.
Right.
What you're seeing at the facility is more authentic than what you're seeing at your house. Yeah. Most likely.
And that's why I really like it, like being able to do the board and trains, and again, having those couple days or even just a couple minutes sometimes with the dog, you know, up in the training room, just letting it kind of like desensitize, get to sniff and smell, whatever, everything around. Because for that reason, well, it's like I get to sit back and kind of just like read the room, you know, see how this dog is actually truly being. If it's something where the dog is coming in and he's just sniffing around, completely ignores me, then it's like, okay, like he doesn't really care, you know. But if the dog comes in and is like side-eyeing me the whole time and then goes and sits in the corner in the far end of the room, it's like, okay, you know, like, but I think that's another way that I kind of like structure it a little bit sometimes is trying to read kind of how the dog is going to interact with me to understand. Yeah. But
because usually like in the lessons and stuff, obviously the owners are there the whole time.
Right.
And then the dog is going back to the house.
Yeah.
Immediately after the lesson. So a lot of it is having to like obviously take the information they give me, also try to be able to assess the dog as like authentically as I can in that moment, and then be able to create real life, realistic ways of applying little pieces bit by bit at home to start changing some of the behavior. It was funny too because Bridget actually sent me a video of a trainer that was talking about like how she only does board and trains now, and she stopped doing private lessons because she found that like her board and train clients were just far more successful. And her example was that there are so many things that she would see in board and trains and be able to fix as she went along that like she felt like she wasn't able to do in private lessons because the dog is still at home and with the clients and you see them less and all this kind of stuff. And like initially you could probably look at that and be like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, of course board and trains work better. But honestly, and this is going to sound kind of harsh, all I heard when I saw that video was like, I don't know how to communicate with my clients because that doesn't make sense to me.
Right. I mean, it's understandable to have one or two clients where you're just not on the same page all the time. But but
you're not asking the right questions.
Of them should be.
Like if there's stuff that's going on that like, if you're finding a big disparity between the success of like your private lesson clients and your board and train clients, that's a you problem.
Yeah.
That's not a program style problem. Because that means that I am somehow able to, I'm not communicating with the client or asking the client the right questions
to get the information I need.
Yeah, to get the information I need to be able to like give them the same amount of success at home. And because again, maybe you could run into where you're having clients that just aren't doing the work, or incapable of doing the work, or whatever. Yep. But again, I still would argue, like, yes, you'll get those clients. It wouldn't
be most of your clients.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be like the most of them. And because usually if people are picking, if somebody comes to you, and some people maybe do private lessons because of financial reasons, they just can't afford a board and train because they're usually more expensive. But most of the time, I would say people pick private lessons because they want to be involved. Yeah. And they want to do the work. So typically, if it's not working, it's probably a you thing, right, and not a them thing. So you have to figure out some way to like bridge that gap a little bit better. Yeah. And again, I think that maybe it's just like a time and experience thing, because I do think there is a benefit to doing board and trains to build up more experience to be able to do private lessons more effectively. Yeah. Because, and I think that's why a lot of newer trainers start in the board and train realm and then continue forward, and eventually if they decide they want to do private lessons, kind of go into that side of it, because with the board and train like you described, you get far more experience seeing dogs in like their raw state. Yeah. Because you could argue that I never get to see a dog like in a state where it isn't somehow being influenced by the owner's presence at their house, like all of those different factors. Yeah, because even when you do in-homes and stuff, the dog's always on, it's like best behavior, or whatever. It's like, Or if anything, it's behaving worse. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because of the emboldenment factors of like all those other things with the owners and the environment they're in, where like you said, as soon as like the owners leave after your initial intake and you have the dog, you see such a drastic different version of the dog than they either described or you just saw in the lobby when they were still around. Yep. They leave and then you're like, oh, so this is the dog. Yes. The immediate switch when the dog knows, okay, the owners are gone. Exactly. It's always such a huge difference. Yeah, which I think is very invaluable. Like that's experience that you'll get in no other way. Yeah. Being able to see that. That's how you make your sample size connections of, so the dog was displaying these behaviors when the owner was around, and then as soon as they're gone, now it looks like this. So, okay, so when I see a dog doing the like charging at me, taking a step back, charging at me, taking a step back, and then all of a sudden the owner's gone and they're just shaking and terrified. Okay, so now next time I see that, it's fear. Yes. Right? Yeah, that's true. Then because I did board and trains for such a long time too, then now when I do a lesson, I don't need the owners to leave for me to be like, okay, is it fear or not? I can see all of those little nuances and be like, okay, that's what it always led to back then. You know what I mean? And now I know without even having to question it, like your dog's just scared. Right. Versus the dog that maybe stands there confidently, posturing, tail straight up, not making a peep and looking at you. Okay, your dog, your dog is completely different in a completely different realm. Yes. So I think those are the things that it's like over time, you just have to collect that data. Yeah, that makes sense. And then be able to apply it in like certain situations. Because I guess I was trying to think of like when that started happening for me, when I felt confident in doing that, and it does make a lot of sense that it was just like, of course, like over time having that big sample size. And that's why I think it's so valuable that like, if you want to like be a dog trainer and you want to like go and maybe do your own thing or have your own company one day or whatever your ultimate goals are, like do not start there. You can't start there. No. You can't. I mean, you could, but like you are missing out on the opportunity to have your hands on so many dogs and be around so many dogs. Right. Like working at a company or something like that on your way to getting to that point is like, it's just so important. Right. Because there's no other, you as a single person cannot facilitate the amount of dogs that you need to be competent as a dog trainer by the time you want to like do your own thing.
Right.
And you won't have enough experience.
Yeah.
And honestly, those clients then are going to suffer. Because like say like in an environment like this, where it's a company, you have varying levels of experience here. So it's like when we have newer trainers that come in and they're in charge of these dogs. Okay, sure, yes, they're in charge of these dogs, but they have so many resources behind them.
Yep.
So the client ultimately, even if you get paired with a trainer who's got a year, 2 years experience, that trainer has you, has me, has Bridget, has David,
right.
all of these years of experience to fall back on to make sure that the client's quality of training and work that they're getting is not going to be compromised while that person is learning.
And I even do that. I mean, I still ask all the time, just information, questions, and stuff to all of you guys. But yeah, it's nice that you have that for sure. And again, I think you made a good point with newer trainers being board and trained, that they have that constant flow of that.
Yes.
Not only the constant flow of the dogs, but also you get to focus just on the dogs.
Yes. There's
and
less pressure.
Yes.
Because when you because there's just an added element of that first lesson. Yes, I'm having to do a million things at once. I'm having to like take the information that they're giving me while also looking at your dog and compare and contrast to what you're telling me, what I'm seeing, what I actually know is going on, and then figuring out how to deliver that information to you in a way that is professional, kind, compassionate, but clear and direct. And then also be able to work with that dog in a way that, you know what I mean? Like there's so many
within an hour.
Yeah, there's like so many different elements to it on that first initial introduction that it's like that first interaction you have with that client is so pivotal and important, and it's gonna create the trajectory of like the whole next 9 sessions that you have with them. And like same with you guys with the board and trains and stuff. But yeah, so I feel like starting with board and trains and stuff, and then and some people like to just do board and trains, and that's fine. Some people don't have the desire to do private lessons, and everyone is different. But I do think that when you move to private lessons, there is that like added element where you're like, okay, so now I have to teach the dog and the owner at the same time.
You really need to be like on your shit,
Yeah, and that can be like a whole nother thing. So it definitely is something that, because usually my brain's going in a million different ways right now, but like to tie it back into how important I think it is to start with a company and not immediately go out on your own, is that usually if you start your own company, most people don't have the resources to do board and train, so they're just doing lessons.
Yeah.
So it's like you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself right away by doing something that's like you have to figure out how to train this dog and the owner's standing there watching you the whole time. Yep. So you don't have any room to make mistakes, you know what I mean? Or like trial and error and experiment with stuff and things like that.
Well, you can't like, if you don't have the experience, you can't wait till the 3rd or 4th lesson to be like, oh, okay, now I know like what this dog's doing. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, like I said, you were able to do all of that within an hour. Yeah. And that's how you set the groundwork. Yes. And then you build up from there. But yeah, I feel like without that experience, it takes a long time because then you have to do one thing at a time, Yes. Yeah.
And again, you then have clients that are having to get like subpar work from you.
Right, for those first 3 lessons.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're charging them accordingly and fairly, and they know that you're new, and you're green and you're just trying to figure these things out, I think is fine. But I just don't know why people would start there. Yeah. I feel like it's so much more beneficial to just start with a company, get some experience and footing underneath of you, and then if you decide you want to go that route, go ahead. Because you might also find out that like that's hard. Yeah. And maybe you don't want to do that.
It's very true.
But it just kind of depends.
Yeah.
With the board and train, so because you have a smaller windows of interaction with the clients and stuff like that, because obviously you spend, like, you'll speak to them before, you get all their paperwork, and then you guys spend, what, like 20 minutes usually at the intake?
Yeah.
Kind of discussing?
Yeah, like 15, 20 minutes, just kind of, like talking about more stuff. Like, I definitely will go in more depth with those questions, like you were saying, that aren't as black and white. And just trying to get like more of a read, because again, it also depends on like situations.
Yeah.
Why did that dog bite? I don't know. It was, this person was just coming over and the dog was hanging out in his bed and they just came over just to give him a pet and then he bit him. It's like, okay, well, was the dog like sleeping? Was the dog already anxious and you just came in? You know what I mean? Like, so there are things that, again, digging a little deeper into certain things with clients I've found has helped me a lot with understanding how to go forward, how to treat this dog for moving forward in terms of the training.
Yeah.
Just because it's bitten two people or whatever, knowing why is so much more important.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
for sure.
But
because I would argue there's some bites that I'm like, that doesn't count.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You know?
That doesn't count. It does, but like it does.
Right. It's not good, but it's
also like,
right.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
With having like a smaller amount of time at the beginning initially, and I know like you guys give updates and like communicate while the dog's there and stuff. Most of your like work with the client really begins when they like do the pickup.
Yeah, like the send home and then the follow-ups. Yeah. And I think that's the importance for me to do the updates. I find is to build that relationship, you know.
Yeah.
And then also continue to kind of like see where their head's at, because sometimes you fill out the questionnaire, these are the goals, blah, 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 whatever. And then the first or second like follow-up, you know, I always ask like if they have any questions or anything. And not all the time, but sometimes there will be situations where the owner will kind of notice something else that was, so like the other major issues overcasted this other little thing.
And they remember it.
And they're like, yeah, you know, they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm glad that their walks are doing good, glad the reactivity, blah, blah, whatever is good. But I was thinking like he or she like also does this every once in a while or whatever, you know? And then I found that also helps to me, obviously, so that I can kind of work on that as well. But to build that relationship of kind of like talking things through a little bit more and getting their brain kind of working, setting them up for the send home. But obviously the updates are obviously good for them as well, because they miss their dogs and they want to know how they're doing. But but again, just the trainer perspective of things, how we kind of like look at it, I use it as an opportunity, because I don't have this time to build with you every session and stuff until the send home. I use those moments of kind of like talking and doing those updates. That's why I like calling too. You know, some people email, text, whatever. But I like to call just to, again, build a little bit more personal like relationship with them. Yeah. And then the send home is the longest period of time that we will usually spend together. Yeah. Going over stuff, again, kind of understanding what they need, what clarification they need, or understanding whatever. Obviously the send home is more of that teaching lesson for them, not so much for the dog, because at that point the dog knows everything. Yeah. And then the follow-ups are the same thing. Then it's like, okay, you guys go figure your stuff out together. Yeah. See where the dog's pushing you back, see where you're confused on something. Then follow-ups are just checking boxes after that. Yeah. You know?
Which, doing the board and trains, I mean, obviously we talked about like the specific unique challenges that you might have doing one-on-ones where, you know, you're doing all the things all at one time. But I feel like with board and trains, you have a very unique challenge in that way too, where when you're doing the send home, there's probably a lot of like expectations the client brings into that lesson.
Yeah.
You know what I
absolutely.
mean? Where they're like, I just sent my dog away for 4 weeks and spent a lot of money, and this stuff better look pristine.
Right. Oh, absolutely. We definitely
which is its
have
own
that.
challenges of like, I'm sure having ways to communicate to them that like, yes, your dog knows these things, but like, you also have to understand that it's not automatically going to be perfect now that you're back in the picture, and like walking them through that whole thing too.
Yep. And it's, I think some people get a little, I don't know if worried be the right word, but in the send home, I'm working with the dog. I'm showing the owners how to do the commands, whatever. Dog's killing it. Owner goes up, tries to do it, and they struggle.
Yeah.
Right. And they kind of get like down on themselves sometimes because they're like, well, you know, it's just not, I'm like, and my first thing is always, you've been doing this for an hour or two.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 4 weeks with you, right? So clearly there is a difference.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that always makes them feel a little bit better, but, or usually makes them feel better, but it's something that there are definitely those situations where, again, communication is the key point to it, where I want to have this transition from here to home be as positive and as smooth as possible. It might not look perfect, and it will never look perfect, honestly, in the send home, because you need time to get your stuff together too. Get comfortable and understand and ask those questions so that I can help you. But it's the send home, I always try to be clear that it's more of like your groundwork, right? How I have the first couple days to kind of like see how the things are going to go and kind of critique here and there. They need to do that moving forward as well.
Yeah.
And again, kind of what you were saying is they go back to that place where they're different. They go back with those people that they're different with, you know? And so there is those times where the owner will struggle with that as well, you know? But again, that's why I love the importance, or have the importance of the follow-ups, because, you know, and I really, really push doing the follow-ups.
Yeah.
Because it's something where you don't have to do it every week sometimes. You don't have to do it for the whole year, whatever, but take advantage of them, because it's something where if you have a question, I want to help you.
Yeah.
Right? For your benefit and obviously for the dog's benefit.
Oh yeah.
But
well, because you care about all the effort and work that you put into the dog, and you want to see that be successful and everything. Which, I don't know, an example of like an analogy that I've always used to help people understand like the privates versus board and trains and how they work is, it's like with private sessions, it's like we're teaching you, like say you work at a business that's using like a new computer program, like we're teaching you basically how that program was designed, the code that was written, like all of the ins and outs of it, and I'm teaching you how to do that whole process. So by the time that program is completed and ready to be run, you already know how to run it perfectly.
Yeah.
Because you just went through every single phase with me. Whereas like with a board and train, the program was written, and now you just are the rep who came into the company and was like, I'm going to show you how to use it and like implement it into your company at that point.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's almost like reversed.
Yeah.
In a way that you are starting raw with the dog and building up, you know,
they're
with the owner as
learning
well.
at the same rate,
Yes.
which sometimes can be more difficult, but sometimes can be super beneficial, because the skill level of the owner is comparable to the skill level of the dog.
Yeah.
So they're both like
I think the transition too.
Exactly. So it's like the dog progresses a little, the owner progresses a little, and they're right at the same level. Whereas like you pick up your dog from board and train and they're like a F1 race car and you're like still driving a Honda Civic. You know what I mean? And it's like you gotta develop your skills to be able to handle that level of proficiency and knowledge that the dog has at that point, and like the nuance to it. So
and that's and those are those things. I think with the similarities of it, you know, we obviously do get a lot of like, I'm sure like the same questions, general questions and stuff of what do I do in this situation, blah blah blah. But but you are able to answer it as the dog's kind of working through it still. You know, where the dog might have already I might have already worked through some of that stuff where it's like jumping, for example. You know, dog doesn't jump on me because day one, he's not jumping on me, you know, but they still have that question and that, you know, they still need to work through it because they haven't had that exposure yet. So it is important to spend that send home teaching, answering those questions so that when it presents itself, you can do it.
Yeah. Because it's almost worse in like a send home if the dog does perfect.
Yep.
Because then the owner never has the ability or the space to like see how to fix the problem. Because training a dog, and we say this all the time a million times, but I guess it's never hurts to reiterate it. But like training the dog is like not something that you just do to them and then they just do it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like
they're perfect.
It's a skill set. And if you don't know how to use the skill set, then the dog is not going to behave as if it's trained.
Right.
Like if I gave my dogs to somebody who didn't understand how their training worked and how to hold them accountable and all the stuff that they knew, they're going to be like, cool.
Right. There you go. Thanks.
Maybe for a week they would have some residual like behaviors and habits, but as soon as it's not being enforced and they're not being held to a standard and all of that kind of stuff, like they're just going to fizzle off and just fall off the deep end and behave like any other dog would.
Yep. Or just, go back into those old patterns that those habits that they were able to kind of make before.
Exactly.
But well, and that's another thing going, like what you were saying with sometimes the expectations are to be perfect by the end of the board and trains.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I do mention to them a lot is that if your dog in the send home is doing absolutely terrible, then I did not do my job.
Yes.
Right? That's bad.
It shouldn't be terrible.
Right. But
like,
perfect too is it's good. I would love for your dog to be perfect, but it is again the point of learning for the owners as well. And so I don't mind when the dog makes a mistake because they're so excited to see mom or dad and they run off the bed when we're practicing bed stays, right? Those are the things that they need to see because when they go home that night and they're hanging out on the couch and they're like, well, let's try it. And they go put it on the bed and then they go sit down. That dog's back in the house, back with the owners, not with me.
Yeah.
And so they're going to jump off that bed or run to your mom, like to their mom or dad, whatever, you know? So it's something that it is good to have mistakes in those send homes for sure, so that you can see it because they need to know, one, what it looks like, and two, how to fix it. You know?
Because they need to be competent.
Yeah.
Because it's less about like training the dog. Obviously, you want to see the dog make progress and be trained. You know what I mean? And have skills and know how to do them and all that kind of stuff. And see the behavioral changes. But ultimately, the success of training a dog is making sure the owner is competent in knowing, like, when it doesn't go right, what do I do? They should never feel like by the end of like our training journey, whether that's like the sessions are done, the board and train's done, the follow-ups, we've done enough, whatever. To me, the end is when you don't feel like you need me anymore.
Yes.
You shouldn't need me anymore.
Yes.
You should feel like, okay, if my dog jumps, I know what to do. If my dog starts regressing on the walk, I know how to fix that. If my dog if I see these behaviors come back up, I know how to fix that.
Right.
And obviously, you should always feel comfortable reaching out to your trainer for help and stuff and opinions. And a lot of my clients still do that. But like, I feel good knowing that like, I don't want you to need me all the time. I've done a good job if you feel like you've got it. You know, whatever your dog does, you've got it.
And that's again why I always tell owners to take advantage of the follow-ups, because it's something that's like, I want to be here to help and make sure that these boxes are checked off. And I will do everything in my power to do that. But the goal is to not have to always reach out to me. Yes, right. So it's like, so exactly what you're saying. Like, it's good to have me as someone to help.
Yes.
But
we're building many dog trainers for their specific dog.
Yes, exactly.
By the time you're done, you are not a dog trainer in a professional dog trainer.
Right.
In the capacity that like you could then take a dog and know how to train it.
Right.
But
Transfer
you know how
that
to train
to another random
your dog.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's the important part, is
Yeah.
that you should feel competent and comfortable knowing, I know my dog, I know their tendencies, I know their personalities, I know all the things about them, and I feel comfortable that they're not unpredictable to me, they don't feel unpredictable, and I know how to counter or, address anything that comes up.
Because I get, and this is another thing, I get life happens, you go on vacation, work gets busy, whatever, and you're just not able to work through certain things or keep up on certain things,
Fall off the wagon a bit.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to say it more nicely, but yes.
I do that too,
Yeah.
Some days all my dogs will maybe be like barking. And I'm like, when did we get here?
Right.
When did you start doing this again?
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I kind of have to reassess, like, okay, we got to implement a few things. Maybe I got a little lazy somewhere along the way. Or
but that doesn't mean that the dogs forget.
No, they don't.
And that is, I think that is the point that, we're trying to make, is that once you know what it is, it's okay if the dog, if you slip or whatever, but it's knowing that all you need to do is implement what you already know into that training again, kind of what you were just saying, and then and then fix it back up, know?
It's like riding a bike.
Yeah.
You never really forget how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You just maybe haven't for a while.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, as far as like our overall topic, I think we kind of touched on all the ins and outs of it.
Yeah.
On the ideas of like, I think really the important part is feeling comfortable and like creating a comfortable space for your clients to be honest with you about things.
Yeah.
And feel like you guys can like communicate well.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that, then I don't think you're going to be successful in any capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Because the client needs to feel like they can be honest and comfortable communicating. And I wanted to bring this up earlier, and now I'm remembering now I'm talking about this. Delivering information that is hard for clients to hear. I think it's probably good to touch on how we do that.
Yes.
Because sometimes you have to tell clients that like they're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Or something that they're doing is causing the issues.
Yeah.
And I think ways that I've found that works best is to deliver the information just objectively and in a way that isn't like you're doing this and it's causing this and you're having these issues because of it being your fault.
Mm-hmm.
I think, let me preface. I've had clients where I've had to get to that point.
Yes.
Because they need to hear it directly, and you kind of have to level with them and be like, okay, you're making bad choices.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you that, and you're putting everybody else at risk.
For the benefit of the whole.
Yes.
Right.
You're not paying me ultimately to be nice to you.
Right.
You're paying me to help you train your dog and to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And if I can do that and be nice, I will. But if I have to be a little stern and brash about it, then I will also do that.
Right.
Because that's what you hired me for.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't hire me to be your yes man.
Yes,
okay? You hired me to tell you the truth. So there has been times where I've had to do that. Mm-hmm. But generally, like say it's a first session and the dog is like absurdly anxious. And you know that, yes, maybe there might be a genetic predisposition, but also a lot of it is influenced and reinforced by the owner doing things. Mm-hmm. I will usually give my generic speech of, anxiety in dogs is something that generally manifests when they don't have clear direction.
Yeah.
And so our job and what we're going to try to accomplish through the training is making you guys feel comfortable and confident in how to communicate with your dog, what you don't want, what you do want, and then helping the dog be held accountable for those things so that they have clarity.
Yep.
And that kind of sets the tone of like, in a nice way, you haven't been the leader that your dog needs you to be. Mm-hmm. And then from there, they're able to receive that information. Because, I mean, they came to you because they know they're not doing something right.
Right.
You know what I mean? If people came to you, they already know they're not doing a good job. And I hate it when I see like videos of like assessments or lessons where the owner or the dog trainer is immediately like pointing fingers and like you can tell they're just jaded to the point where they're just like rude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, you've created these problems and yada, yada, yada. Stop petting your dog and don't let him on the furniture and the bed. You know, all this kind of stuff where it's like, they already know they're not doing a good job. You don't got to rub their face in it when they come to the lesson. Like,
open the line of communication. I think that's what it is too. It's the communication part of it too, where we humanize the dog a little bit more. So and so there is that like sheltering sometimes, and that some owners can have with their dog, and again kind of feeds into certain issues. But I think for me, like the same speech kind of thing is very similar, but having that communication is open is something that I always kind of like lay in as well. Like, because that's going to be the biggest part, is that they know for sure what you want them to do, and you know what they need from you in certain situations, right? Don't bring them to the park if they're gonna like be super anxious, at least right away. You know, like don't force them into uncomfortable situations and then wonder why.
Or you know what to do.
Right. Like, wonder
so,
why they tried biting someone when they came out to pet them. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I have clients that just started with 2 dogs that are getting into altercations in the house. And they were like, so should we just keep them separate still for right now? And I said, yes, until we are prepared and we have skills and things to do to address the issues when they make bad choices. Until we're prepared to do that, we need to avoid the bad choices altogether. But once we're ready to address it and set parameters in place and communicate with them about that stuff, then it's okay, you know? But you don't want to be caught in a situation where you're like, I can't do anything about this. Right. You know? And
I think that's where a lot of people, a lot of clients, they kind of beat themselves up with it, or again, kind of like what you were saying, like they know there's something wrong or something that they're not doing, in the sense of the big example of leash reactivity, right? Something where they avoid certain situations or avoid doing things because they know that their dog is reactive or whatever, right? And I think it's important when we start to do those follow-ups and work through those things, like bringing them to the park. You know, there's this one mastiff that I've done a lot of follow-ups with, not because the dog needs work through those going to the park and walking and whatever. He's great. It's more of like the client needs that confirmation of like working through those things, you know, because avoidance is good to that point. But like you're saying, once you're able to do it, we need to do it. We need to and we need to keep it consistent. Again, the biggest thing from the board and train is that I can do this and I can work through certain things, you know, and get a dog to a certain point. But then when I give that dog back to you, you need to kind of take the reins full force and like run with it, you know, and start to slip. And then you're only going to feed into your own anxiety more so. But if it's something where we can kind of just run with it and get you on the same page, and again, my part being clear about what we're doing the whole way, then that's where we get that smooth transition, you know?
Yeah. But, and that probably is another challenge that you have with the board and trains, is that because the owner isn't able to see the progress and the transformation in real time, once you get to where you're having them do a lot of the things that they were just terrified to ever do with their dog, they don't have the same trust level in the dog that maybe like you do at that point, because they didn't get to see all of it. You know,
they didn't see the process.
And I think that's why it's so good you guys do all your updates and stuff, because that, I'm sure that bridges the gap a little bit. You know, when you're like, oh yeah, we socialized off muzzle today, and they're gonna be like, what? You know, so
or nail trims.
Whereas like obviously with lessons, it's like they see the dog making those progresses little by little. So by the time we're like, okay, we're going to the park, they're like, I'm ready.
Yep.
We're both ready at this point. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is always good. But
Speaking of board and trains, there's one off camera. He's acting a damn fool over there. Being a goof. The comedic relief. But yeah.
yeah,
So,
I don't know. I thought it was a good topic,
I think so.
but
We hit some.
hopefully it helps someone. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think that if there's one takeaway for any new trainers out there that I could give you, it's don't rush in trying to like do your own thing too fast. Allow yourself the time to build up the experience and learn from people. You can always learn. Okay, I've been doing this like almost 10 years, and I'm still learning. And I learn all the time from trainers that maybe even have been doing it shorter mostly. Because a lot of times the newer trainers that come in, they come in with like fresh eyes, more creativity, all of that kind of stuff. So never limit yourself on thinking you know it all. Because I would say like, I don't know, I feel like every dog trainer, like once you hit like 2 years of dog training, you get a big head.
Yeah.
I think it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Like everybody does. Once you hit like 2 years, you're like, I know everything.
I could do it all. Yeah.
But yeah, so find places where you can get your hands on a lot of dogs and just soak in all that information. And don't discount the importance of learning and honing your people skills.
Yes.
Obviously, your skills with dogs is super important, but it won't do shit for you if you're terrible.
If you can't transition that over.
Yeah.
Yep. Whether it's board and train or one-on-one.
If people don't like you,
Yep.
good luck being a dog trainer.
Yep.
People
Exactly.
don't like you. So definitely work on your people skills and figuring out like ways to deliver information well to people, that it's going to be received well. All that stuff is so important.
And the biggest thing, always ask questions. Never be scared to ask.
Yeah. No, honestly. I mean,
Whether a client or a trainer or whatever.
no stupid questions.
No.
No such thing.
No such thing. No
Thanks, honey.
such thing.
But, alrighty. Well, I think that's it for us.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.